better sit down.
Hello again.
Oops, wait a minute, they gotta come in here.
Right. Come on.
Their turn. They did it right.
Left. Come on. Mark time. Come on. Order. Left. Straight. Stand up. Honor guard! National Guard, attention. Present arms. Order, arms. Right face. Right shoulder, arms. Forward, march. On left, march. On left, march.
Shells from flags, military honors.
Right, forward.
Well, this is a real honor for me to be doing this eulogy for Harold. I'm Willie Hochhalter, one of the brothers, one of the survivors, because I'm here. And Harold and Donna and Lillian, both with us today. You know, it's great to be celebrating with you today Harold's life and how difficult it is to just put this all in a capsule of his life that was so active. So let's reflect on his life while he was with us. We want this to be a celebration of what Harold has and what he contributed to each one of us with his life while he was with us. Harold was born in July 9 of 1933, one of the 8 children of Rudy and Dorothy Hochhalter. During his younger years, he attended Franklin Grade School, where he enjoyed being involved in sport programs at the school and helped to win many citywide championships. Harold started working at Community Creamery at a very young age, and part of his job was to deliver milk in jars to the troop trains during World War II here in Missoula. Harold met Pat at Missoula Stop and Shop, and they were married September of '56. And when I read that, I thought, Stop and Shop, was that the store that in 1950s is where you shopped for your wife? And apparently he delivered milk there, I believe, and she worked there, and so that's where they met each other. So it wasn't a place in the 50s where you could go to this place and find your wife. But thank the Lord, they were together for so many years. They had 3 children, Stevie, and that's what we called him, Shelley and Karen. And from there, many other little treasures that they enjoyed and loved along the way. Harold loved his children and loved his grandchildren. It was very evident in his life. Harold was a Korean War veteran in the Chemical Smoke Division, wonderfully discharged as a sergeant in 1961. Returning to the States, he went back to work at the creamery where he worked until his retirement in 1977. He had purchased the retail routes and continued the milk business as community home service dairy, and is still operated today by his son Steve. Harold received medal gold National Supervisor Award, and it's also worthy to note that he was the first salesman that sold yogurt here in Missoula. My family and had the fortune of just being so involved with Harold and Pat, and especially Harold because our sons worked for Harold. And so I just have a few stories that I received from them, and I want to quickly go through them. But our three sons, Brett, Brandon, and Brock, had first experience as part of their family. Brandon, while still in the university, stayed with Harold and Pat for a year. And while Brandon just brought me to the airport here yesterday, I says, you know, what were some of the experiences that you had with Harold? Just share them with me. He said, I had many during that year. But you know, there's one that stood out. One day while he was in the garage, he had just returned from school, and Harold was in the garage putting in his refrigerator milk and some sodas, and he mentioned to Brandon, he says, priority is important in our lives, and well, first he said the priority is important, and he didn't know if he was talking about, you know, rotating that milk. You have to drink the oldest first, but you know, he was really talking about life. And he actually spelled out the word joy, J-O-Y. And he said, your priorities in life should be joy, J-O-Y. Jesus, others, and yourself. What a lesson he learned from that. Brett also worked with the community home service, and his experience was just a little bit different. You know, he was in Missoula and worked in the community home service as well. He had weekend duty in Great Falls, and so after the meeting, he was heading back because he had to start the milk delivery at around midnight, and he had a car accident, drove off the road, and he called us, and this was probably around 10, 11 o'clock, and he says, I'm in a bar, I'm in Potomac. We had no idea where Potomac was. And so I said, well, you just stay there. We knew it was Potomac, we knew it was Potomac. And so when we arrived there, he was gone. Apparently his cousin Tommy had already picked him up, and when we arrived in Missoula, I'm making a long story short, we arrived in Missoula, he was already making his deliveries with the home service. So he's committed to working for Harold and carrying out his job. Brock, our youngest son, I asked him just last night again, what was the big thing that he received from Harold, and he worked for him as well. And he was on the Swan Lake route, and his first morning out, they stopped at the Swan Lake Buffet, and Harold said, now we're in a hurry. Now you have to understand, our son was the type of person that you didn't mix the corn with the potatoes with the meat. They all had their stacks. Well, when he saw Harold's plate with the eggs and the hash browns, and then a bunch of ketchup, if you will, on top of that, and then he just started mixing it up. Brock couldn't understand that. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. But he says, we're in a hurry, so you do the same. I don't mix my food. Well, you're going to today. So he did, and he told me he's been doing that now for 35 years. And I know that, you know, all of us have stories, life experiences of Harold as an uncle, brother, dad, grandpa. But during Harold's life, he developed a lot of craft skills, woodworking, carpentry, plumbing, and many of the people benefited from the skills that he taught himself. Harold was also interested in his German ancestry and heritage. He had, anytime you wanted information about, sometimes you'd have to go to Shelley, but they had the family tree, and it was quite a catalog, if you will. But he could tell you when people were born and who was related, and we'd say, okay, there's a Hochhalter in Hochhalter, there's a Hochhalter in Louisville, are they related? And he could quickly tell you they were not, or they were. Harold, Pat passed away in 2006, just 2 months before their 50th anniversary. He never recovered from the grief of his loss. And I recall some of the visits that I made at Burlington Square, and most recently when he was with Randy and Shelley, to encourage Harold whatever we could, because we live in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's just when we were out here, we visited as much as we could. But you know, I constantly mentioned to him that, you know, it could be that, you know, you're always saying you want to go home, you want to see Pat. But you know, I told him many times, I says, you know, it could be that your room in the mansion that God's preparing for you is not ready. And I told him, I says, you know, it could be a shortage of sheetrock, plywood, flooring. And I said at times, especially when I heard maybe from Lillian or Shelley that he had been ornery that day, and I just say, you know, maybe you were just too ornery. So, you know, you could tell that he wasn't convinced, because the first thing he would do would he'd be singing his hit song, "Oh Lord, I want to go home." You probably know that song.
Yes.
So today, Harold's home. He's in his eternal home with Jesus. You know, we as God's children have victory over death. It had been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? We have the victory in the Lord Jesus Christ. Death has been defeated, and we have the hope beyond the grave. These words are found in 1 Corinthians. You know, Harold's ashes are here. But you know, Harold right now is in heaven. He is celebrating, you know, with Harold and Pat, his sister, 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and the many others that are there in heaven. So he's in his eternal home. But you know, there's going to be grieving. All of us, you know, are going to miss a loved one, and it's going to take some time longer than others to give up grieving, because we are going to miss him. But don't be ashamed to grieve. Don't be ashamed to cry, because it's all part of our emotions. Harold is no longer with us, but he's in a lot better place. And in closing, I would just like to thank that the Honor Guard was here to celebrate Harold's life and to witness this military honor guard that has celebrated a soldier that answered his call to his country. Thanks again for coming.
today, and we will have a reception up at my house at 5 o'clock. We have to be back down here at 3. So, but everyone's welcome, and so anyone and everyone who would like to be there, please
Pulled
come.
pork.
All right, so thank you all.